evolve. For the tech stack, for the front end, we are using React Native, and of course, we are using Expo, and we're using the latest SDK 50 version, and also Expo router for managing the navigation between different screens. On the backend, we are building a GraphQL API using IBM Stepzen, and this GraphQL API that we are building is connecting and is pulling data from different sources. On one hand, for the exercise data source, we are using an external REST API called API Ninjas, and for our custom database where we store information about sets, we are using MongoDB, which is a very scalable and performant NoSQL database. This project is sponsored by IBM Stepzen, and if you're not familiar with them, with IBM Stepzen, you can easily build a GraphQL API in literally minutes by running a simple command. We're using it in today's project, so if you're interested, you'll be able to see IBM Stepzen in action. Before we start, I want to mention that this is actually part 2 of a project. Today we are doing part 2. If you're interested in following the part 1 where we have built the user interface, we set up the GraphQL API, we are pulling the exercise database, and we are also reading data from our MongoDB, check out the first part, which is on our channel on YouTube, or you can follow the URL that you see here. The plan for today is going to be to, previous time we didn't manage to build everything, so I decided let's do a part 2 of this one, and also let's do some more advanced things like pagination, a lot of other interesting things that you're gonna learn today. So the plan is following. We're gonna start by saving new sets in the database because we implemented reading sets from the database, but we need to also save them. We also want to link sets to a specific user, because if you're building a multi-user application, you want to link somehow the performance and the set to a specific user. We're gonna implement charts to see the feedback. We're gonna implement searching and filtering, and finally pagination to be able to scroll and load more exercises from our API. So a lot of interesting and cool stuff. I'm pretty excited. If you are also excited and want to follow along, make sure to download the updated version of Asset Bundle following this URL, assets.notjust.dev/workouts. And if you want the source code to start from the same point, there are two options. You are either gonna check the GitHub branch in following the link in the description below. There is the workout repository, and there is also part 1 branch that will contain the code that we're gonna use to start today. Also, the second option, if you don't want to go through the GitHub, if you don't want to do that, you can simply download the updated asset bundle, and there I'm actually including the source code and the repository from part 1, and that's probably gonna be the easiest way. And I'm gonna show you how we can run and update our API keys to make it work. So if you're ready, let's get started. Hello everyone who is joining us live. Let me also pop up the chat so that I can see your messages. Let's put it here. Let me know where are you joining us from, and let me know if you're actually following this tutorial yourself. Hello Vladimir, hello Julio, Rodrigo, how are you doing? Jagdish, Navin, and Rogelio. Rogelio, how are you doing? Yes, we're gonna have let's get started, and let me actually go here. And this is going to be the initial repository that you're gonna get from the source code, and it contains everything that we have done in part 1. I didn't do anything behind the scenes because I really wanted to show you step by step everything that we are doing. So after you get this repository either from GitHub or from Asset Bundle, let me actually go ahead and stop everything. Clear. Go ahead and install the node packages by running npm install. This will check the package.json and will install all the dependencies in the node modules directory. The next step is going to be to deploy our API. For that, we're gonna have to update a couple of API keys because the ones that we have right now in the repository will be deleted, of course, not to be overused. So open the API folder and let's see what will we need to change. The first step is in the Stepzen config file. Here is the endpoint of your project. There is something wrong with my stream. Now the connection seems to be excellent. Let me know if everything is fine from the technical perspective, if you can see everything. Vladimir is asking, hi Vadim, do you still work out in the morning? Great question. Actually, I just got back to the gym yesterday. So yeah, I had quite a long period of vacation, and now I'm excited to get back to it, and all the muscles are sore today. Yeah, not sure if everything is fine with the streaming software. It tells me that it's not very smooth, but hopefully everything is going to be okay. So anyway, back to our API. In the previous live stream, we have created and deployed our Stepzen endpoint, or our Stepzen API. The Stepzen endpoint will have a name. So here in the endpoints, go ahead in your account, check the endpoint name. For example, in my case, I'm working with API soft manatee. Go ahead and change it here in order for Stepzen to know to which project to connect to. That's going to be the first step. Then let's check the other parts. In index, we don't have to do anything. And I'm going to start with exercise folder. Exercises folder is the API, is the Stepzen configuration that connects with API ninjas. There, you also need an API key. So go ahead in your account on API ninjas, press on this button, show API key, copy it, come back here, and under exercises index.graphql, here in the headers, you're gonna see the value of your API key, so replace it with your actual API key. At this point, we can go ahead and start our GraphQL endpoint, or let's say redeploy it. So for that, I'm gonna open a new terminal, and here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna simply run Stepzen start. This will look through the configuration and will redeploy, if there are any updates, the API to Stepzen. In fact, our API is always running, so even before running Stepzen start, it was running because it's running in the cloud on Stepzen platform. Now we simply said like, hey, check if there are updates and redeploy it. And every time we're gonna do actually some updates, for example, if we're gonna change something and save, you're gonna see that Stepzen will redeploy this. I'm gonna go back and then let's go ahead and open the dashboard. Here you're in the console, you're gonna see the URL for the dashboard Stepzen. Let's go ahead and copy this URL. Let's open it in our browser. And here we're gonna see some queries. The sets query might not work yet because we didn't update the MongoDB API, but I want to just make sure that at least our exercise API key is working. So let's press on the builder, and here I'm gonna close the sets and I'm gonna open exercises query. Let me simply query the name and let's run this query. All right, we see some data. That means that our API, that means that if we go here, the connection from API Ninja to our GraphQL API built with IBM Stepzen is still working correctly. If that's true, let's follow along and also make sure that our connection from MongoDB to GraphQL API is still working. And then we're gonna have everything ready to start implementing the feature for today. For MongoDB, if you remember, we used the MongoDB Atlas, which is a way to easily host your MongoDB databases in the cloud. So here we have our project. Go ahead, log in your account. And if we go to, let's say, overview, I'm gonna go to database. Let's select the cluster that you are using. After selecting the cluster, we're going to select collections to see the list of, let's say, databases that we have in our deployment. Here is the sample, but below it we have a workhouse database that we created previous time. In the workhouse database, we have a collection called sets, which you can think of as a table. It's not a table, it's called a collection because MongoDB is a NoSQL database, and we are adding here documents or unstructured data. So yeah, we see already some exercises that we have added previously, and every exercise contains, every set contains the exercise, the number of repetitions, and the weight. All right, we also, in previous live stream, enable the data API. So if I go to data API, we should have a URL endpoint. Let's go ahead and copy this URL endpoint and go to our project. There are two folders, curl and curl 0.1. The first one, which we're gonna rename in a moment, let's not do that now, but let's open curl index GraphQL, and this is the configuration for our GraphQL endpoint that will connect with our MongoDB database and will read the sets from the database. So in this, we have an endpoint. So make sure that it's the same endpoint that you see in your data page here. So simply copy it, come back and do a search. It should start with this endpoint, and at the end it should have action find, because we are trying to send a find request to our collection. The next step to make sure that this is working is to go ahead in the users and make sure that you have API key. Here, if you don't have any API keys, go ahead and create an API key, give it a name, for example, test, generate, copy this API key, come back and replace it in the API key of our curl index GraphQL for the query sets. Go ahead, replace it here, save, and also let's do the same thing for the second folder, which is going to be responsible for creating a new set and inserting it in the database. Go ahead and make sure to update the API key here and double check the endpoint to match the one that you have. And at the end, we should have action.insert1. After you do that, open the terminal and make sure there are no errors deploying the API. Because if you have done, like, I don't know, some typos, you're gonna see the error here and the GraphQL API is not gonna be deployed. So if you see that deploying and then done in 2.4 seconds, then we are sure that the API that we updated here, the configuration of Stepzen, has been taken into consideration and redeployed on our Stepzen dashboard. So we can go here, we can press refresh to make sure that we refresh the schema. And what we can do is we can open the next query called sets in the documents. Let's select the ID, exercise reps, and wait. If I'm gonna execute this query, we should see a list of documents, and they, if you look, they match the ones that we saw when we were exploring our database collection in the cluster one here, collection. In the workout sets. Another things that might lead to some errors are the name of our cluster, the name of our database, and the name of our collection. So in the first curl request that is responsible for reading and returning our sets, or let's say finding them, here we are specifying the collection, data source, and database. In your case, if you name them differently, maybe in your case, it's not going to be cluster 1, but maybe it's going to be cluster 0. Make sure that this cluster 1 matches your cluster name. Make sure that the collection sets matches the name of your collection here, for example, sets, and workouts, this is the database. So double check that. After you deploy, this is going to, should connect to MongoDB API and it should work. I don't know, another thing that might cause some issues is if you go to database data API, make sure that the data API access is read and write, because by default it's going to be no access and you're not going to be able to access your data. So select read and write and test again. All right. So at this moment, what do we know? At this moment, we know that our API works correctly. So the backend configuration from GraphQL API that we created using IBM Stepzen, it's connecting correctly to the API ninjas to get a list of exercises, and at the same time is connecting correctly to MongoDB to read the list of sets from the database. So let's go ahead and run our application, React Native application that we connected with our GraphQL API, and let's see if everything is working in the application as we left it previous time. So what I'm gonna do in the first terminal or in a new terminal, go ahead and do npm start. This will start the development server, and we can press from here I to open an iOS simulator, or you can scan this QR code using the Expo Go application on your device. Did you change the stream time? No, actually this is our usual time, but today is Tuesday, so we are doing more streams this week. Actually, for the next 3 weeks, we're gonna have 2 streams every week. A lot of ideas, a lot of content that we planned for you guys. So yeah, if you're interested and if you're on your journey to become a React Native developer, make sure to subscribe to our channel because we have a lot of tutorials, project build, very hands-on tutorials for building mobile application, full stack mobile applications. We are very, very close to reaching that milestone of 100K and receiving the button. So if you can spend 3-4 seconds to press the subscribe button, that would mean a lot to us. Thank you very much. And let's continue with the project. Here we have our application running. The home screen is a list of exercises. At the moment, it doesn't have like pagination, so we only see the first probably 10 exercises. We can press on them. We go to the details page, and here we see, first of all, more information and instructions about the exercise. All of this, if you remember, is coming from API Ninjas that is providing us with the exercises dataset. And here we also see a list of sets that are in our database. At the moment, these are all the sets in the database, so probably we're gonna have to filter them by the exercise name and also by the user ID. But before we do that, what we actually have to do is go ahead and make sure that we are able to add things here. At the moment, adding is not implemented, and this was the last feature that we stopped at during the previous live stream. And this is going to be the first thing that we are gonna do now. So if you're ready, we can get started. Let's go ahead. And what we're gonna do. So in the previous live stream, we already started this integration for creating and inserting sets in our MongoDB database. For that, we have this curl 0.1 folder that is going to use the REST directive in order to send a REST API request to the following endpoint, which is our MongoDB data endpoint. And if you see at the end, we have action insert one, meaning that this endpoint is going to help us insert set. Before we actually move along, let me show you a simple curl request that will demonstrate how adding a set through the REST API is working. If you're going to open this raw curl examples, here I have a couple of examples, maybe some API keys that hopefully I'm not going to forget to delete. And the last one, this is the one that ends with insert one. So that basically means that what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to leave out Stepzen import for a second just to send a curl request. Curl is a simple utility that helps us send get and post request or any kind of request to an endpoint. In this case, we are sending a post request with this API key and the content type. Make sure this is your API key in order for it to work. For the data source, we are targeting cluster 1, database workouts, collection sets, and we are trying to insert this document that has parameter exercise, weight, reps. If I'm gonna do here something like, are you working? Question mark, just for us to see if this request is working. Let's try to copy this curl request. Open a terminal, a brand new terminal, and paste this curl request. Oh my God, here it is. If I'm gonna press enter, we see inserted ID, which means that something happened. If I'm gonna go back to our database, cluster 1, collections, and here under workout sets, we should see the last item to have an exercise name, something like, are you working? Yes. Weight 4, reps 1. That means that by sending a post request to this endpoint with this data, we are actually inserting things or items in our database. So that's exactly what we are doing here with our GraphQL with Stepzen. We are creating a GraphQL endpoint that will, when executed, will send this post request to this endpoint with the following values: name, and the following variables: collection, data source, database, and document. Exactly the ones that we have here in the data. Collection, database, data source, and document. If I'm gonna try to insert one from Stepzen, for example, to do that, I'm going to delete this query from here. Let's add a new mutation in the builder. In the builder, let's add a new mutation. A query in GraphQL is used to get data. A mutation is used to create or update data. So let's press on the plus sign here. It's called my query for now. For the collection, database, and data source, what do we have? For us, collection is in queries. If I'm gonna look, collection is sets. So let's copy paste it to make sure that we don't make mistakes. Database, from our curl request that we made sure that it's working, the database is workout, and the data source is cluster 1. But what's up with this document? Like, how can we write something here? As we see, GraphQL at this moment thinks that this document should be a string. If we look in our queries, we know that our document should be an object, because our document that we want to insert is an object. So if we are simply gonna replace it here like this, and then if we're gonna get back the inserted item ID, we're gonna see that we cannot execute this because it's unexpected name and string and so on. Why? Because the document in our index GraphQL, the variable document is of type input document. The input document is a simple scalar, which does not specify that, hey, this should be an object with this kind of inputs. Let's rename it from scalar to input. input document, and let's here provide the parameters of this input document. What do we have there? Exercise, weight, and reps. So exercise should be a string, and we add exclamation mark to mark it as required. The exercise should be a required string. Then we have sets, not sets but reps, right? This is an integer, so it's going to be an integer, also with exclamation mark. And then we have weight, which is float, but maybe it's not with exclamation mark because there are some exercises that you can do without any added weight. So now, if I'm going to check where the console to see if Stepzen deployed it correctly, it did. Now we can go to the dashboard and we can refresh. It deleted everything. That's not very nice, but we can add a new mutation. My query, again, collection. What do we have here? I'm gonna have to remember. We're gonna optimize this in a moment, not to have to specify everything. For example, data source is this one. Data source. Collection, I think it's sets, and databases workouts. And for the document, already here we see that the document has reps, exercise, and that's it, because these are the only two important, the required one. And let's, for the exercise name, say from Stepzen. Maybe for the weight, we can specify here, I don't know, 45.5. You can add these variables from the user interface or directly in the query here. So you saw that I added the weight directly in the query, and it was automatically synchronized with the user interface in the builder. But probably you cannot see correctly because I'm hiding that view, but yeah, it's not that important. Just make sure that you query back the inserted ID, and with this query, let's try to run it. So if I execute the query, we should see the inserted ID of a new exercise. If we go to the MongoDB and if we press on the refresh button at the top, we should see that we already have 8 documents in our database, and one of the last ones should be from Stepzen with the values that we specified here: reps, exercise, and so on. Well, that means that now from our Stepzen, we can send a mutation and create something in our database. Not only read things from the database, but also create them. I want to go back to our Stepzen declaration, and I want to hard code these 3 fields: the collection, the data source, and the database, in order for us not to have to specify them always. Because I will also rename the my query to insert set. The mutation, which in fact is a mutation, is going to be insert set. Then I'm also going to rename this input to set, let's say new set. Let's copy this name and replace it here under the document, from input document to new set. Now I will take these 3 and I will move them here after the headers as body. How is it called? I'm gonna look in the previous example. Let's open the previous curl folder, and here we have the post body. The post body that hard codes the collection, data source, and database. Let's do the same for our headers. We actually don't need a comma. We just put the post body string with triple quotes, and here we specify collection, data source, and database. Now that we have hard coded them in the post body here, we can safely remove them from our variables, not to ask them from the user or from our front end. Now if we save and if I check everything to be deployed without errors, I can go back to here. Let me select all and copy my mutation, because after I press refresh, most probably it's gonna reset to sets, and I can go back and set it here to this one. Right away we see that there is no mutation called my query, because now it's called insert set, and the insert set doesn't need all these collection, data source and database, because we have hard coded them, and it only needs the document for the reps and so on. Whew, that's nice. The next step, while we are here, for us to be able to send this request from our user interface, we should not hard code the values of reps, exercise, and so on here, but rather add it on the mutation. I'm gonna rename this mutation to insert set, and I'm gonna add here a variable. The variable is going to be $ new set, and the type should be new set, and it should be like this. This new set type is coming from the input that we specified here. So now I can remove from the document, I can remove everything here, or maybe not remove, but let's copy it. We're gonna need it in a moment. Let's just simply put the variable new set here, and in the variables we're gonna need that object, but here it's JSON, so we need to wrap our keys in a string as well. For the weight, let's do it like this. And what's happening? Actually we need to have an object with a value new set that is an object. So at the end I'm gonna have to close another object. I hope it's, or maybe I can do prettify. Yes. So now from variables we can send this information. I can send it, and we see don't generate a remote URL specification. Okay, that's interesting. Something is wrong there. Why did we mess up here? Collection sets, data source cluster 1, database, document new set, insert set, document. Exercise should be a string, reps should be int, weight should be float. Specification on the URL. Path insert set. If I'm gonna take this object and hard code it back here, I just want to try to understand if the problem is with the object, or if a problem is with something else that we have created. So let me just do it like this. No, it's still an error. Document. What did I do wrong here? Insert set, document new set. Post body. Here we also have this post body. Interesting. Let me see. How many more parts are you making for this application? I think this is going to be the last one. Julio, let me try to get back to your question a bit later. The endpoint. Post body. I'm looking at the previous one. It had these request headers. This might be the error? I don't think so. Let's do copy, refresh, and run again. No, it doesn't want. Headers, variables. Pretty sure it should be with this post body. Because if I comment it out and then add back this collection, string, data source, string, and database string, and then if I go here, refresh, and basically going back, so for the collection it's going to be sets, database, workouts, and data source, cluster 1. Let's see. Yeah, now it works. Why the same way of post body is working in our sets request? Let me see if it actually works. I'm gonna copy this mutation and I'm gonna try a sets query. Yeah, it's working without specifying. But at the same time, we don't have any variables. So maybe it's not correctly merging them together, you know? Yeah, I think so. Because if I go back to this mutation, and if I, for example, yeah, I think here I need to add, if we specify post body, then our variables, where? Not here, not here, in the previous one. If we have a post body here, then our variables are going to be completely ignored. So that means that if I run connection, yes. So that means that here I'm gonna have to say that the document should come from a variable. But how to access variable? Let's check the Stepzen documentation. Stepzen post body. The message body for the request. Variables are supported. See directive reference. Perfect. So here let's search for post body. Where is it? Here, post body. Yeah, the Stepzen will automatically generate this post body based on the variables, but if we provide it, yeah, it's this syntax. Consider pay, but okay. So first name and last name. To access them, we are using this syntax. So let me copy it. In the document, we need to provide here get. The parameter name is called document. And we will remove a collection, database, and data source. So now we are overriding, or not, we're specifying the post body where we hard code the collection, data source, and database to make it easier for us to send this request, not to have to specify them all the time. And for the document, we are simply accessing, or we are getting it from our variables here. So let's see if we don't have any errors. We don't. Let's go to our dashboard. Let's copy, refresh, remove a collection database because we remove them, run the query, and again, it's not working. It's not working again. Document, get document. New set. Maybe we cannot get the whole document. Maybe we're gonna have to do them separately with name, with exercise reps, and weight. Let's see the documentation if they specify anything about object. First name, last name. Patch without a post body. To pass JSON as argument. In the GraphQL mutation, the argument JSON patch must be added as a variable to the post body argument. JSON patch. And that's a string. Oh, get JSON. Get JSON, but in our case, that's not a JSON. So I think, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna simply say that document. How can we create an object here? Can we do it like this? Just simply overriding them like exercise, test, reps 10, and weight 10. Will this work? Send, or refresh and then send. Sets cluster workouts. Maybe have a typo somewhere that you can see. Sets cluster workouts. Okay, so there seems to be some issues with this one. Maybe I don't, I missed something or I have a typo, but I don't see at the moment. So I was expecting it to work like this, but we're gonna work with what we have, document. We're gonna work with by commenting this out And by having the collection as a string here, collection as a string, can we maybe hard code it here? No, we cannot. Collection string. We are gonna have a data source string, and database also string. So now at least it's working, so we can move on. I'm gonna refresh, and the only thing is that we're gonna have to specify these fields, and of course they will be required. So I'm gonna put them as required, all of them. Refresh, and we see that we need more things here. For example, maybe we don't need it here. Yeah, as we can see, the new set here, because we made it required, in the mutation should also be required. And in the insert set, we also need to specify here database, which we are going to hard code in the query document itself. So it's going to be workout. I'm going to do data source. It's going to be cluster 1. And for the collection, we're going to have sets. Now the variables will still be only the new set, and if we execute, it should work. Yes, we see inserted, and from Stepzen 1, 2, 3, if I execute it, let's copy the inserted ID, and let's check in the MongoDB if by filtering here, and we're gonna look for ID, object ID, and this one, you can scroll and find it, but I'm gonna look for it. Yes, we see from Stepzen 1, 2, 3, reps and weight is coming directly from our variables. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and copy the document of this mutation, because we need to execute the same mutation in our React Native application when we press add button. So we're gonna need that in our source. Let's see where we have it. In the components, we have new set input. Let's start by writing the const mutation document equal, we need the GraphQL, so let's import GraphQL from, where did we import the GraphQL from? From GraphQL request. From GraphQL request, so let's define this query and let's paste it, the one that we copied from our dashboard and that we tested that it's working correctly. After we have done that, we will need to execute this mutation, but for that we're gonna need to import the hook use mutation from Tanstack React query, and also the what? And the GraphQL client. We're gonna also need the GraphQL client from the one that we have defined with configuration on how to connect with our Stepzen. It's in this file GraphQL client. Simply adds the authorization with the API key. And this API key, make sure that in the environment you have your own API key from Stepzen. Now, let's go ahead in our new set input component. Here, let's define the use mutation hook. In this mutation, we need to send an object with what? Let me open the documentation of use mutation from React query. We are using the latest version, the version 5, and let's go to the documentation. From here, let's check Where? Mutations. We just need the mutation function. Mutation function, which is an async function that will receive some data. For example, new set, and what it will do is it will use the GraphQL client it will return GraphQL client dot request. The request that we're gonna do is this mutation document, and the variables. Let me see how we did it previously. GraphQL client.request, and also we need to send some variables. So here, variables, no? Yes, the variables are going to be the new set that we are going to receive here when executing the mutation. But how do we execute the mutation? Well, the use mutation hook will not execute the mutation. It will only set it up, and it will give us back the mutate function that, when called with a new set, will execute this mutation function. So we need to call that in the on or add set. And here let's do that by calling mutate, and we need to send the variables that will be the new set. For example, exercise is gonna be from up. Reps is going to be 10. Let's just test it out to make sure that it's working, and weight is going to be 10 as well. Not sure what it says, but we can try to press it here and look for from application document the exercise in our database of sets. So let's reset it here, the filter. Let's refresh. And we have 12. If I look at the last one, I hope to see from up. We have 12. Maybe there are more pages. If I'm gonna press one more time and go ahead and refresh, will we have 13? No. That means that there is an error. The error handling in a mutation can happen in a couple of ways. Mutation here. Mutation.isError. So here the use mutation will give us back also the error, and also the is error, and also is pending. So whenever is pending, that means that we are executing the mutation, so we should wait. I could change the title of our button to a conditional, like if it's pending, question mark, I'm gonna do adding. It's gonna look weird, but at least we're gonna see if something is happening. And after the button, I'm gonna have to put another view, because after the whole row that we currently have in the new set, I want to, let's put a new view. I want to write here a text where we will say some error. Failed to add the set. And in order for this text to be inside the container, let's move the styles from here to the top view. And the styles that we're gonna have to this view are only going to be styles.row. Row? Not row, row. Like this. So let's go in the style sheet. And the container will not have flex direction row. That's the difference. only the row style will have flex direction row. And the gap also from here, we're gonna move it here. Maybe there as well, because we need some gap between the lines. For the text, you can add some style like color red. And we're gonna conditionally render it only if there is an error, only if is error is true. So let's check here. If is error, only then render the text by doing it like this. So I'm gonna try to press add, fail to add set. But why? We can go ahead and maybe better to simply console log the error to see what's happening there. If I press, let's open the console where we have our metro running. So if I press add here, we see new set of required type. New set was not provided. New set of provided new set. New set variables. Variables should be an object where we have a key new set. Okay, that was probably the error. Now if I'm gonna do add, again was not provided. Variables, set, mutation function, new set. Let me try to simply override them here directly, like new set is equal to this one, and see if it's gonna work. No, it's still not working. GraphQL request, and I need variables. Let's check GraphQL request to see how maybe I'm missing something for the mutation itself. Right here, let's see. I need a request. I need a mutation. Mutation. Add movie title, variables, and GraphQL request, mutation, and then variables. So it's not an object with a key variables, it's directly the variables. That's my mistake. It's not an object with variables, but it's directly the variables object. So like this. Wait. I need to remove variables. This one, I need to remove this and last one. Now it should be just an object. Inside that we have a new set, which if I'm gonna press add, it worked. Now I'm gonna move from hard-coded to a variable that we're gonna receive from mutation. And because we have the same name, I can simplify it like this. And even like this. And because we have like one return statement, I can remove a return and I can remove these brackets in order for the arrow function to return automatically the response from GraphQL client. So now this use mutation is much simpler. We have a mutation function, it will receive a new set, it will send it here. And if I do here add, the data that we have here should go in our database. And now instead of 12, if I refresh, we should have 14. Yes, because we press it 2 times. But instead of hard coding the reps and wait, we need to take them from the values that the user writes here. To do that, the reps we're going to take from the state variable reps. The problem is that they are still a string. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say number parse int, and we're gonna send the reps string from the state variable. This way we are transforming from a string to a number, and the same thing with a weight, but in this case it's gonna be number dot parse float weight. Okay, so if I'm gonna do for reps 1, 2, 3 and for weight 10, and if I'm gonna press add, let's see what was added in that database. So I'm gonna refresh. I'm gonna scroll down until we find that from the application reps 1, 2, 3 weight 10. Perfect. And the same thing, like if I do reps 5 and weight 7.5, will it correctly parse the 0.5? Let's check that out. I'm gonna refresh again. 7.5 in the weight. Perfect. So cheers for that. Let's drink some coffee and we're gonna continue. We also need the exercise because at the moment we're hard coding it, right? Where we will take it from? Well, in this new set input, we don't know the exercise, but on the page where we use the new set input, which is our source application and the name, the details page, in this page, we actually know the exercise name because we actually know the exercise. So what I'm gonna do is to the new set input, let's send here the exercise name, or maybe the whole exercise, or only the name. Let's only choose the exercise.name. Now we're sending through properties with the name of the exercise to the new set input. Let's go to the new set input and receive it with the same property name, exercise name. Now we can take it and instead of hard coding from the app, let's use exercise name. So now we are in, for example, T-bar row with handle. If I'm gonna do 15 reps with no weight, let's see how it will work in this situation. Let's check in the database. Refresh. 17 documents. The last one is the exercise T-bar row with handle, 15 reps, and the weight is null. Perfect. That's okay because we didn't specify weight. This is let's say an exercise without any weight. Okay, perfect. So now we have finished like the full cycle of connecting our user interface, and when the user inputs something here, we are going to send it to our GraphQL API. Our GraphQL API will save it in our MongoDB database, and then later on, if we come back there to that exercise, we're going to be able to query it and see the repetitions in this list. Let's wait to see them loading. Something happened there. Cannot read properties, sets of undefined. I think we broke it with this null value. You know why? Because we specify that weight in our GraphQL endpoint. If we look at the API curl folder when requesting it, we specify that the weight should be a float, but not a null. Is that the reason why it's failing? Because if I update, let's see if, for example, querying the sets from the dashboard works. It doesn't. If we change this to how to update it to I think it would be better if we don't save it at all if it's not there. So that would happen from our new set input. Here, let's do const new set equal to this value. But we don't put the weight in the new set. We actually check if something exists, then new set dot weight is equal to number parse float. So maybe we can check if number parse float if it's an actual number, then we add it in our new set object, because this is optional and sometimes it's not gonna be. So instead of writing null var, we are going to not put it at all. Now this new set we're gonna have to send to the mutate function, and I'm actually going to go ahead and remove. How do I remove this one? Remove this one with null weight and try again to see how it works. Let's go here. Let's say that we did 10 repetitions of this one, and let's add the set. Let's go here. Let's refresh. T-bar row reps, and it doesn't have any weight. But if I'm gonna add a rep, still doesn't work. Weird. But if I'm gonna add 1 and 2, adding, will it add then? Just testing like the edge cases, you know, like having the weight, not having a weight. Yes, it works here as well. But anyway, like the sets request is still not working. That's a bit weird. Why sets document? Let me check in the curl index here. What do we have? Documents, entry, documents. ID, exercise. If I only have an ID here, still doesn't work. Did I mess something here with a post body? Maybe it doesn't need the last comma. Yeah, you know what? maybe I fixed that issue that I had before. Maybe I simply had that comma in the other GraphQL. No, I didn't. I don't know. But now if I go to the T-bar row handle, for example, we see this list. Perfect. So we have successfully saved new sets in the database from the application, all the way from our application to GraphQL, from GraphQL to our MongoDB. The next step is going to be to probably first of all filter when we request the sets, to filter them by the exercise, because if I go to any exercise, it's going to contain the same list. So that's going to be the next step. But before that, let me go ahead and do a git checkout main, git add, git commit, save sets to database, git push origin main. All right. How are you doing, guys? Following along? Everything nice? Everything working for you? Hello, Ashish. Hello, I think Rohan. For Julio is asking about the responsiveness, how to work with it. Yeah, there are a lot of ways, but in a lot of cases, the rule of thumb is to work with mostly flex boxes. So instead of specifying fixed width that works nice on one screen size, you rather work with flex boxes and relative widths. Maybe if you also want to deploy it on large screen sizes, think about max widths as well. Not only like if an item is 100% of a screen on the phone, it might be okay, but on a a tablet or on web, you might want to have it as a maximum width, not to be stretched the whole width of the screen. Then again, yes, like you work with dimensions to have some rules around. For example, it depends on the layout that you're building. But if you have a list and you want on the mobile to have one single column, but on tablets to have 2 columns and on web to have 3 columns, the amount of columns you can calculate based on the dimension. So take the dimension, check like the dimension ranges, and make like the number of columns variable based on that. So that would be how it works. Or you can use some libraries. For example, you can use Tamagui, which is great for this responsiveness. But again, you don't necessarily have to use anything extra. You can do it yourself without any additional dependencies. Some cases it's just easier to use like a library that is created for that. Anyway, let's continue building our application. We're gonna start fixing some stuff. For example, if I go to our detail screen, we have an error saying that virtualized list should never be nested inside plain scroll view with the same orientation. Why is this happening? Well, this is happening because our sets list is actually a flat list. A flat list that we can scroll through. And if we look where we use this sets list, we're gonna see that we are using that in our application, in the name, in the detail screen. This is where we render the sets list. Again, set list is a flat list, and it's used inside a scroll view. The whole page is scrollable, the flat list is scrollable, and it's not recommended to have 2 scrollable things with the same direction nested one inside another. Because yeah, like when we scroll, like we don't know like which list we actually want to scroll. You might think that we can simply transform this scroll view to a view, this one to a style, and it will work as we expect. But no, actually it's not gonna work, because everything at the top that we have here will remain static, and only the thing that we have here will be scrollable. So if, for example, we leave it even less space, only this part is going to be scrollable. Some cases, maybe that's what you want, but sometimes you want to scroll the whole page, right? To do that, there is a way to actually implement it. And the way to do it is to send to the flat list a property called list header component. So if you send here some JSX, for example, a text header with style font size 20, in that case, the component is going to scroll together with the items. So as you can see, the header is there, but it scrolls together with the items. Now the thing is that the flat list is in our sets list, but everything else on the top is in the parent component. So how do we manage everything? Well, it's going to be a bit interesting, but we're going to simply send it through parameters to this set list, also as a, let's call it again, list header component. This is going to be equal to, let's say, the same text header that we are currently displaying. So let me copy it from here and send it through parameters. Now, list header component, we are sending it to the sets list. Let's go to the sets list and let's receive it here in the properties. It's called list header component. Now let's simply take it and pass it down to our flat list. Now What does that mean? That means that our sets list is responsible for rendering the sets, but is not responsible for rendering the header. It only receives it and passes it down to the flat list. We still have this header at the top, but it's managed from the parent component. So from the parent, we can changing from outside. So if I save, we see changing from outside. What does that mean? That means that instead of rendering a text here, we can render everything else above the sets list. Maybe the stack screen I'm gonna leave there, but the panel, the second panel with instructions and so on, we're gonna copy from there and we're gonna put it here. And because every component should, the component should be like one single component, we're going to wrap it around the empty brackets, which is also called template string. So if we do that, now we should have this container that is scrollable and it doesn't complain that it has a list inside the list. Perfect. Yes, we lost some styles because now, if you remember, in the container, which is now the page, we had this gap. Now it's no longer working here, so I'm gonna remove a gap from the container, and we will have to add it to the parent component here. At the moment, there is nothing here, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a view with a style gap 5 or how much it was. Now the styles are back here. Okay. So yeah, it's a bit weird, but if you understand like how everything moves around, it actually makes sense. You can optimize this by extracting the whole header into a separate component, passing there like variables, but that's gonna be a bit time consuming, but it's gonna make your code cleaner because right now the sets list is opening here and it's ending all the way here. So it's quite a long component where we have simply one huge property that specifies how it should render the header, this one. Let's see if it still works. Yes, if it still works, we can adding, it's adding, perfect. The scroll bar here, we can either hide it, and probably to hide it, we're gonna go to the flat list in the sets list and say shows, not horizontal, but vertical. Scroll indicator, false. And in this case, we do not see the scroll indicator there. Okay, all right. So that was a little bit of cleaning. Yeah, all right. Let me do git add, git commit, refactor details page to not have nested lists. All right, the next step I think is going to be filtering out all and displaying only the sets that are related to this exact exercise. To do that, what we have to implement is, let's see at the raw curl example, and the first curl request here is the one that finds exercises. At the moment, if I copy everything except the Stepzen import, and if I send it in our terminal, we're gonna see that it actually returns basically everything. We will need to somehow pass through the data a variable that will specify the filtering that we want to apply when reading items from the database. Let's go ahead and our MongoDB in the data API, open the documentation to see how we can send this filter. Where is it? Advanced view our API documentation. Here it should be the data API. The document. That API examples. Let's find a single document. This is find one, find multiple documents. This is the action find that we are looking at. And here we see that we specify all the data source database collection and also the filter. So the filter that we're gonna use, first of all, let's test it on our actual database, because we can go to the database through the atlas and test the filter that we would like to use. For example, I will open the sets and I will scroll down and I will only want to check the exercises for this T-bar row with handle. In the filter, we can specify an object where we want to specify, basically the filter. So we will say that we only want the exercise, or I think it's exercise like this, where it matches this T-bar row with handle. If I'm gonna apply, the query will only return me one item that matches that, not one, but all the items where the exercise matches this one. So that means that we can use this filter object as it's shown in the documentation in the data of our request. So let's go here where we have our curl request, where we have data row. Let's do a comma at the end and add filter. And let's paste the filter that we got there. Will it work? Not sure. Filter, object. Maybe it will. I hope it will. So let's copy this curl request again, open the terminal. And now if I will execute it, I expect it to return only one item. Invalid syntax. Of course. Why? Filter, exercise, invalid character, this one after object key. Oh, I see. I made a typo. I put the filter closing brackets, not in the right place. Now if I'm gonna execute it again, we should see only one document. All right, that's good. Now what that means is that we can add a filter parameter to our Stepzen endpoint, and the endpoint to request sets is in our curl folder. And the first step that I'm gonna do is actually rename this from curl to let's rename it to MongoDB. And after renaming the folder, we need to go into the API index, and here instead of curl, say MongoDB. Now let's go into the MongoDB, and what do we have here? We have a post body, and again we're gonna have to add a new variable to this query, and probably it's not gonna work by appending it here, but let's try. Well, I'm gonna do it a bit differently. Let me try to do it directly here by specifying filter and by specifying an object where the exercise is going to be equal to, how did we have it there? This one. Let me see if it was deployed correctly. I think it was. And let's see through the dashboard by simply sending a request to the sets. If it, yes, it works in this situation. That means that I can add a variable to our sets query called exercise of type string. And here we need to get that variable. To get the variable back in our GraphQL directive, we will see that how to get it. Get JSON or get, simply .get here. So instead of t-bar handle, I'm gonna leave a string and I'm only gonna add the .get exercise. Will it work? It doesn't need the $sign. That's in a different part. There it's simply exercise. Will it work? It was deployed. Let's see in our dashboard. If I refresh, we're gonna try unable to find key exercise, because the key exercise should be required if we are trying to get it. And if I refresh now, we see that we need to provide here the exercise. That is going to be a variable exercise of type with $sign of type string required. Now in the variables field here, let's specify exercise and let's get the name. Where is it? T-bar something. If I execute, yes, let me close the history. We have only the documents or only the sets for this t-bar row. If I'm gonna check another exercise that we have in our here, for example, push from here, if I'm gonna say only give me exercise push, yes, it works, and it actually returns them only the push exercises. That means that we updated our query. Let's copy it and let's go in our React Native application. Right now, it's not gonna work because we updated the query itself. We need to go to the source application name, because not name, in the components sets list. In the sets list, we have a query. Let's remove it and update it to have a variable exercise here as well. Sets list, because our query has a variable, we have to add it to our query key as well, because all the queries for different exercises, they will be different. But again, we need to know the name of the exercise. Here we don't know it, but in the details screen, we know it. In a similar way how we sent the exercise name to the new set input, let's send it to our sets list as well, because we need the exercise name in the list to be able to only query exercises with this exercise name. Again, in order for React query to cache the data for different exercise queries separately, and not override previous ones, we will have to add after sets another variable that indicates like the variable to which we want to identify this query with. So in this case, it's going to be exercise name. The exercise name will also go into the variables here. So the variables is an object with the value exercise, with a key exercise and the value, the exercise name that we receive. All right, now if everything is working, if we go here, we see only one set. If we go to the T-bar row with handle, we see only one set. And if we go to, for example, something else, we see no sets. Yeah, for Atlas Stone, we see no sets. Nice, perfect. So now if I'm gonna add, like, for example, 4 and 3 here to Atlas Stone, it doesn't refresh automatically. But if I go back and come here, we see that it was actually added correctly and queried correctly. The next question is, how can we automatically update our UI after we send this mutation? That's going to be the next step. Let me go ahead and commit this one, git add, git commit -m, filter sets based on exercise. Git push origin main. Yeah, the question is, how can we update it automatically and not having to go back and come here to update it? That's where in the sets list, we specify the key of this query. And by targeting this key, we can, when executing the mutation, we can say, hey, go ahead and revalidate this query that has the key sets and with this exercise name. So in the new set input, here, let's look in the documentation to double check in the mutation here, how to do that. Invalidate queries. Even with just variables, mutations aren't all that special, but when used with on success option, the query client's invalidate queries method and the query client's set query data, mutation can be a very powerful tool. Okay, mutation. Let's see them. Yeah, we can specify a on success method in the mutation, and this function is going to be called when the mutation successfully executes. So in the new set input, below the mutation function, let's say on success. This is a function that can give you the data, for example, data, variables, and context that was used, but it will simply, for now, we can do a console warn. Hooray! So if I'm gonna go here and add something, we see a hooray method. I'm gonna remove a previous add set console log, which means that we can do something when the mutation successfully executes. What we need to do is we need to invalidate another query that will update our list of sets. To do that, let's see how to invalidate. Probably it's not going to be here. No, don't think it's going to be here, but it's going to be invalidation from mutation, or yeah. Invalidating queries is only half of the battle. Knowing when to invalidate them is the other half. Usually when a mutation in your app succeeds, it's very likely that there are related queries in your application that needs to be invalidated. So in our case, when we add a set to a specific exercise, we need to invalidate the sets list, the query that is displaying the list of sets for that exercise. And only for that exercise, not all the queries in our application that starts with sets for other exercises, right? So yeah, let's see. We need the query client, and we get the queried client using a use query client hook from React Query. Use query client. Let's take it, well, it's not here. It's in the new set input. In the new set input, besides the use mutation, we are also going to import the use query client. Let's get access to this query client. Query client equal use query client. And on success, we can use the query client dot invalidate queries. And here we need to say what queries do we want to invalidate. Here we need to specify a query key. Let's pass here an object, query key, and the query key, this is where actually query keys are also helpful. If we simply say invalidate the query key sets, and if I'm going to refresh, going here, 2 and 4, add, it automatically refreshes. Because we don't necessarily have to provide the full key. We can provide only the beginning of a key, and it will work. So in this case, we are invalidating all the queries where the query key has the first element sets. The problem is that if we leave it like this, yes, it works here, but it's not going to be very performant because it will invalidate the queries of all the exercises. The thing is that we know that by adding a repetition here, but by adding a set here, we only want to update the query that is responsible for this page. So by adding here the second variable, which matches our variable in the query, the exercise name, we are making sure that we only validate the query that is responsible for this exercise. So here, yeah, it's tricky, as they said, like one way is to invalidate, but another way is to know when to invalidate and which exactly queries. So if I go here, for example, to the first one, I can add 2, 4, add, it's adding, and 2 and 4 is here. Another thing what I can do is instead of resetting the fields when we execute the mutate, I would rather reset them when we have a success on success. Because now if I do it 5 and 6 add, it's adding, and only then they are reset. I think this way it's much better. And they automatically update and appear here below. Okay, so that was our query invalidation and having like synchronization of different queries and mutations. Git add, git commit, invalidate sets query when adding a new set. Git push origin main. Perfect. Okay, so far so good. The next step I think is going to be to link sets to the user, because right now, if we look in our database, looking at a set, we don't know which user in our application performed that set. This is fine if you're building this application only for yourself, and if you have only one user in your application. Probably in a most situation, you're going to have multiple users in the application, and you need to somehow link the data to a specific user or to a specific device. To do that, we would have to implement some authentication system if we want to link to a specific user and if we want to allow him to sign in from different devices. But we are not going to do that. What we are going to do is we are going to link data to a specific device. This way, the user doesn't have to sign up. He will download the application. He will start using it right away. And we're going to link the data to a device ID, and whenever he will use that device to sign in, we will be able to retrieve only his data. This is going to be much easier to implement, and at the same time, I'll set the base for this user base data. Hey Binay, how are you doing? Binay, are you from Barcelona? Could I use GraphQL API server separately, and how? What do you mean separately? Yes, like GraphQL API server is an independent piece, so it doesn't have to be part of React Native or anything else. Like React Native is the front end and the back end is GraphQL, and they are completely independent of one another. For simplicity, I created this API in our folder, but it doesn't have to be here. It's nowhere linked, so it can be in a separate folder as well. So yeah, they are independent, separate, and you can connect different clients. For example, if you have a website, you can connect to the same API, to the same GraphQL API. All right, guys, give me 1 minute. I'm gonna go grab another coffee. I'm gonna come back and we're gonna continue with linking sets or linking data to specific users, or let's say specific devices in our application. Then we're gonna have charts, searching, filtering, pagination. Okay, a lot of things to do still. But we're gonna learn a lot today. See you in a second. Hey guys, I'm back. Okay, so got the coffee, got some pistachios to fuel for it, and we are ready to continue. Very interesting question. To this comment, can we track how much calories burn while doing an exercise by using an API or methods? That's a good question, and to be honest, we could. Everything is possible. That's my answer. There is a formula for exercise calorie formula. There is this the way to determine how much calories you are burning. So the formula depends on this METS, and depending on the time that you perform the exercise. So, for example, cycling at this speed uses around 4 METs, and when you put this value in a formula, where is the formula? Here, how to calculate METs. To determine the calories expended by activity, we use this formula. METs multiplied by 3.5, then multiplied by the body weight of a person, divided by 200, and that's going to be the calories per minute. And then you multiply that by the minutes that the person is doing the exercise, and you're going to see how many calories in total he did. So an example of this calculation is here. For example, 30 years old man, 77 kilograms, performing 45 minutes of running at 7 miles per hour. Based on the MAT of this exercise that we can see here in the table, we calculated that this person with this body weight is burning 15 calories a minute, and in 45 minutes that's going to be 700 calories. So you would need to have a database of different exercises, and for every exercise their METs. You can have like some METs database. You can find information here. For example, with a quick search here, I found the ultimate maths database. Am I looking at the right? No, I think no, not at the right thing. But what does MAT stand for? So that's possible. Metabolic equivalent. So there are databases of this for every exercise, and you can do that. Anurag, thank you very much for your comment. Is this application will work in offline mode? Means data synchronization. At this moment, no, but we could do that. We could do that by using the Tanstack query, and there is the, let's say, where is it? There should be a way to make it offline first. Offline queries and mutations. But you'd have to look into the documentation and take a couple of steps to implement that. Simply, there is a way to persist the query client, and that's the easiest way to make it at least somehow offline first, by simply persisting your cache of all the React queries that you have run. So if you open the application, you load the data, and it persists, it writes it to the device storage. So next time when you open it without internet connection, it will simply load it from state. And this is super simple to implement. You just add a plugin, and you just add a plugin like this. Where is it? The cache busting and so on. And it will work. With mutations, for example, if you want to use the application, write some sets and run the mutations when you don't have internet connection, and when having the internet connection, in that situation you'd have to synchronize and send the mutation to the database. But it's also possible. Let me see the last comment and then we can continue. I need some energy. I started my keto diet, and this is the second day and I feel low on energy, so I'm gonna snack on some pistachios if you don't mind. I'm a graduate student. I'm a beginner in native. For my college final year project, I would like to create a fitness app using calories burning features in it. Is it easy or not? As I explained, it's not that complicated. You just need a database of METs, and by putting into this simple formula, you'd need a couple of variables. MET for the exercise that is the user is performing, his body weight, it's important, and the time he's performing it. The time, for example, you can estimate if he's doing like push-ups, you can estimate based on the amount of sets. If you think, okay, he's doing 8 sets, how much time does that take? Usually a couple of seconds at set, maybe 20 seconds in total or 30 seconds. So by doing these averages, you can have it and calculate an estimated number of calories burned. Victor became a member for 9 months. Thank you. I'll be back later, but just to say that you are the man. Vadim, thank you for your work and passion for the program, and especially for teaching. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support, Victor. All right, guys, so let's get back to working. And if you're enjoying it so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot. We're very close to the 100K subscribers. And if you can do us a favor, that I'd appreciate it very, very much. So where are we here? Linking sets to the user. As I said, linking it to a user needs an authentication system. That's out of the scope for this tutorial. We have other tutorials on the channel if you're interested in integrating an authentication system. In a stack that we are using here, I would recommend going with Clerk because it's an independent and it's only focusing on authentication. But again, this is out of the scope. So to link sets to the user, we're gonna actually link the sets to a device. To link it to a device, we need to know an identifier of a device. To know the identifier of a device, there is the Expo device package that can give us a couple of information. I'm actually not sure if it will give us the ID of a device. It will give us a lot of information about the device, like design name and so on, device name. But the device ID, will it give us? Model ID, but this is model. OS, no, this is about operating system. No, I don't think this is what we actually need. Let me put it in code. Okay. React Native device info. The device's unique ID, known as the device ID, which can be useful for certain functionalities. Let's see this library, React Native Device Info. And see what's the status of this library. Let's see if it supports Expo. Get unique ID. Let's see, get device ID. Get the device ID. No, I need device unique ID. The identifier is considered sensitive information. Yeah, I know this is a bit tricky in some app stores, like Google Play, and may lead to your app being removed or rejected if used without user consent or for unapproved purposes. Refer to store policies for more information. This gets the device unique ID on Android. It is currently... Or maybe we can add a simple, very, very simple authentication form where you just do like, give me your username and it will save it on the user device and it will use it for later. Not to have to go through this, because yes, like, it's a bit strict around like identifier users this way. And unless you specify this or make sure that the user knows it, it's against the rules for Google Play and other stores. So probably I'm gonna add, instead of that, I'm gonna add a very simple authentication form that will ask for the username, and then hopefully it's not gonna take us too much time to do that. But it will ask for the username, and then we're going to use that username to link exercises and sets to that specific user. So what do we need? We first of all need, let's say, a new file called off.jsx. In the off.jsx, let me do a React Native functional export to generate a blank template for our off screen. Off screen should be screen. Off screen. In the index, for a second, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna comment out the return with a flat list, and I'm gonna simply do a return redirect to the href to our newly created off screen, just for us to be able to see the off screen. Why is it going to the exercise name? It's going to the off. Okay. Now in the off, what I need is a stack screen, but Vadim, please don't waste a lot of time. Import stack from Expo router. I just want to change the name here to not the name, but the screen. The options title. Sign in. And here I'm going to have a state variable for our username. Set username, use state, that's gonna be initially like this, and for the text username, and let's put a text input below that will have a placeholder, or let's start with a value of the text input. For me, it was imported from React Native Web, which is wrong. It should be imported from React Native text input. And as I said, the value is going to come from our username state. The on change text, again, is going to be set username. And the placeholder, let's do here username. After everything, we're going to have a button imported from, I'm not sure why it's imported from React Native Web. It should import from here. And this button will have a title saying sign in. Okay, let's add some styles. Style sheet. Let's do const styles equal style sheet dot create, and we're gonna have a style for the page, a style for the label, a style for the input, and that's it. The button will be the default button. Let's assign these styles to our view, for example, styles.page. This one is going to be our label, and this one is going to be our input. The page will have a flex 1 in order for it to take the full vertical space. And this will help us align everything inside it on the center of the screen with align items center. Actually, I wanted justify content. Justify content. This will put everything in the center. For the input, or let's add some padding of the page, padding 10. For the input, I'm gonna do the following: border with 1, or let me copy the styles for the input that we have defined in the components new set input. There we have some input with border and so on, and it's gonna simplify us a little bit of work here. It has flex 1, I'm gonna remove the flex 1, and now it looks better. For the label, let's add a gap on the page to add some spacing between the label, button, and so on. For the label, font, weight, bold, font, size 20. Maybe font color, or just color, gray. Dark gray, dim gray, and not bold by 500, 600, something like that. Okay, so here we have a very basic sign-in screen. Maybe the background color of our page should be white. Background color white. Okay. Now I can write here something, I can press sign in, and when that happens, we have to call a function called on sign in. This is going to be a function on sign in. When we press on the button, on press, on sign in. What should happen? What should happen here is we need to store somewhere this username because we're gonna need it in other parts of our application. For example, when querying user sets, we're gonna need the username. For that, we need, let's say, a global a global state where we will store the username when we press sign in here, and from where we will read the username where we will need it later. Because in our screens, we're not going to be able to access this username, which is a local state variable. That's why we need a context provider. Let's go ahead and learn how to add that. I'm going to create a new folder for providers or contexts. And let's create a new file here called offcontext.gsx. To define a React context provider, in general, a React context provider helps us implement easily an out-of-the-box global state and share data between components. To do that, we first have to create the context by importing the function createContext from React. Let's go ahead and create this context. It's going to be called offContext equal createContext. By default, it needs to be a default variable, which is going to be an empty object. The offContext now has two things. It has offContext.provider, which is a way to expose variables to our components, and a consumer, which helps us consume or get values from our context. Let's go ahead and define here a new component called offContextProvider, which is going to be a component. And this component will be the one that will expose or that will wrap around the offContext.provider. As you can see, the offContext.provider expects a value, and this value is going to be what we expose to our components. What do we want to expose to our components? Well, it's a variable called username, right? ABC. But to which components will this username be available to? It's going to be available to all the components inside this offContextProvider. At the moment, we don't have anything here, but we want actually basically all the screens in our application to have access to this one. So we're going to use a specific property, prop in React called children, that is going to be a way to pass down to a custom component a React tree or a list of children. So by simply rendering here children, the children that we are going to receive through offContextProvider will be rendered inside the context provider, and they will have access to the username. Let's see how we should render and where we should render this offContextProvider and where these children will come from. To do that, we need to first export default offContextProvider. And let's go ahead and think about where do we need to put it. As I said, we need access to the username in most of the screens, or let's say in all screens in our application. That means that this is a global context provider. Global context providers, I mentioned previously that they should be declared and specified inside our root layout. So let's open up _layout. And the same way as we are rendering here the query client provider, the same way we're going to render the offContextProvider. So first, let's import it from providers and then offContext. And let's render it probably above. We'll see if it's above or below. And we're going to wrap everything here inside the offContextProvider. Now remember the children that I was mentioning. The children is a special prop, and the children property is going to be everything that we see here. So in a way, when React is rendering this, it's in a way like copying everything that we render here and passing to the children and pasting it here. And this way, all the stacks that we have here will have access to the username. I'm gonna go back because it was just a way to understand for us. But yeah, now all the screens will have access to this off context provider. Now let's see how we can consume this username. For example, let's say in this index, if I want to get access to the username and only redirect if the username is not set, what I'm gonna do is I need a couple of things. I need access to this off context. We can get access to that off context through a hook called use context. I'm going to export from this file a custom hook that will simplify our access to our off context. It's going to be called use off. It's going to be equal to a function that will call use context and will specify our context here. Export const. So whenever we will use that hook use off, we are actually using the context called off context. Let's go ahead in our index and import use off from providers of context. Now in our component here, somewhere at the top, we can say const something equal use off. What we are going to receive back is the value that we specified here. The value is an object, it has a username. So if I'm going to destructure the username from here, let's do the following. Let's redirect to the off screen only if the username is not there. So if username is not set, we're going to redirect to the authentication screen. Otherwise, we're going to render the home screen because the user is already authenticated. So if I refresh, we see the home screen. And if, for example, I'm going to add here a text with the username, we should see the username that we specify, ABC, that we specified here. Well, the thing is that initially there will be no username, and the username is going to change. So the username will become a state variable inside our off context provider. Set username is equal use normal React state. Initially is going to be empty string. Let's remove hard-coded ABC and provide this username from here. Because it's empty string, we see that we are automatically redirected here. And if I will write here ABCDA and I will refresh, it will stay here. But yeah, if it's empty, it redirects us automatically because in the index on the home screen, we are checking if the username is not set, we are redirecting to the /off. Now when we write something here and press sign in, we want to update the username in the off context provider. To update the username, we need to call the set username, and to call this set username, we need to have access to it. To have access to it, we need to export it from this off context provider. We can export values and we can also export functions because in JavaScript a function is a variable. Now that we are exposing set username, let's go on the off screen, and here and maybe I'm gonna let's say local, let's rename this to local username and this one to set local username. Not to confuse them, because local username, and let's replace it in the text input. Local username is the things that we are currently writing here. After we press sign in, only then we want to update it in the global state. So that's why we have a local state here and one in the context. Let's get access to the use of hook. That is our of context. And from there, let's get the set username. And when we press on the button, I want to call set username with a local username that the user typed into the input. Now, if I write here, for example, Vadim, and press sign in, it's not going to redirect me anywhere, but it is going to set it in the global state. In order to redirect, on this off screen, let's also get the username from our global provider username. And I'm going to do the following. I'm going to check again if username in this situation is defined. If it's not null, in that case, I want to return a redirect to our home screen, href/. So this way, initially, we are redirected to the sign in. On the username, I'm going to check, I'm going to write here Vadim, I'm going to press sign in, and I'm redirected back to the home screen. And at the top, we see Vadim. And yeah, I can go back, I can come here, and it's always going to be saved because it's a global state there. If I'm gonna refresh, it's still gonna redirect me to the sign in. I'm gonna say Vadim, sign in, and here we are. From the off screen, that's actually the correct way of guarding this. Like if you are already authenticated, go away. Like don't stay on the off screen. But here in the index, it's actually not the right moment to do this redirection, because this way we are only guarding the home screen. If, for example, someone would open that directly through a deep link, the details screen is not guarded in any way. So an unauthenticated user will be able to check it. So a better way to check this and guard is going to be in the layout. Or maybe not even in the layout, because the layout is the root layout, but it's going to be, I'm going to leave it like this. Now that's I'm going too deep into the authentication workflow, which is not the goal of this tutorial. We can, if you want to guard the detail screen, you can add the same if statement there. So it's still going to work. But because we don't use like deep links here, we are going through the home screen, everything is going to be fine. So in the index, I just need to remove this username. In the off screen, the set username and username here shows with an error because, yes, even though we are not using TypeScript, my Visual Studio Code is trying to infer the types. And if we look in the providers, the problem is that when we define the off context provider, we are setting the value username and set username, but when we create it, we do not set it. So in that situation, we need to provide some default values. For example, username, the default value is going to be empty string, and the set username is going to be a function that will do nothing. And in this way, on the off screen, the set username and username actually works, but the set username should expect a variable. So set username here is going to be username of type string, or just username. And now in the off, yes, the error warnings disappeared, even though we're not using TypeScript. So now we have a very basic authentication system. When we open the application, we have to write the username, then we sign in and we have a username so that we can link sets to a specific user. This is a very simple basic without a password, but it helps us set the different, to be able to use the application with multiple users. So let me go ahead and do git add, git commit -m. Basic of system. Git push origin main. Perfect. So now that we have a username, the next step is going to be to write the username when we add sets in the database, and then filter when we query them. Two things: when we write, we need to do something, and when we read as well. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Ansaf. Thank you. Can you do some project that contain payment method? That's a very good question, because this Friday we have a tutorial dedicated to that. This Friday we're gonna create a tutorial that will cover in-app subscription and paywalls, and specifically remote paywalls, and how to build them and customize them with the best practices. So make sure to stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss that one if you're interested in payment methods. That one is going to be focused around in-app subscriptions. But device ID would be quite interesting. Yes, it would. You could check that library, but again, like make sure that you follow the rules of the platforms if you're planning to deploy that application. Chris from Kenya. Hello, Chris. So, our next steps. As I said, first of all, we need to write the username when we insert a new set. We insert a new set in our components, new set input. When we mutate new set, here we need to specify the username, ABC for example. But it shouldn't be ABC, it should be the one that we stored in the global context. To get access to it, it's pretty simple. We only have to do const username equal use of. So now we take the username, and instead of hard coding it here, we're gonna do username. And because it has the same name and value, we're gonna do it like this. Okay, let's try it. I think it's not gonna work because our GraphQL API doesn't know about it yet. Yeah, failed to add set. That's because if we look at our API, MongoDB, not even MongoDB, but curl 0.1, this is the one responsible for inserting a new set. We see that the document has of the type new set. The new set has this type. Let's add here a parameter called username of type string, and it should be required. Now if I'm gonna make sure that the Stepzen deployed, and if I do add again, it still fails to add it. Let's try to reload probably. And say Vadim, sign in, the first one. And here let's do 2, 3, add. It worked. And I can go into the MongoDB. I can refresh. And I can look at the last one. It has already multiple pages. But the last one has the username Vadim. The first step is done. It was pretty simple. What we had to do is make sure that our GraphQL API expects this username in the new set document and send it when we press on the add button. The next one is going to be filtering and querying only the sets for a specific username. That's going to be in the sets list. Let's check first of all the API. I'm going to open MongoDB because this is where we query sets. And we see that we have this filter that works with the exercise. Let's add a new filter that will be username, which will be also a required string. And we're gonna send it all the way to MongoDB by adding here comma and by adding here name, not name, but username. And let's copy the same syntax from here and say we want to get the parameter with the same name as we specified there, username. Make sure you don't have a comma at the end. And I think now it should work. It deployed. And the thing is that we need to send this variable, username of type string, in our application components sets list. We see that our query only has the exercise. Let's do the same for $, username of type string required. Then the variable username is going to be this username here with only $. Now, when we execute it, in the variable array here, when we execute the request, we need to pass here the username. Where do we get it from? We get it from const username equal use of. You might think, should we add the, because the exercise name, we add it in the query key. Should we also add the username in the query key? The answer is most probably not, because all the queries in the application at a specific time, they will have the same username. So unless you are offering somehow the possibility to have like multiple accounts and switch easily between them, I think Instagram is doing this where you are logged in multiple accounts at the same time and you can easily switch between them. In that case, yes, you might want to add the username to the query key, because otherwise sending the same request from multiple users will override the same query. In our case, we don't expect at the same time to have multiple users signed in, so that's why I'm not gonna add it to the query key. Now let's refresh. I'm gonna say Vadim. If I go to the second one, there are no exercises. If I'm gonna go to the first one, we see 1. I can add one more, like 50, 100, add. It's gonna add it here. If I refresh and simulate that, okay, I'm signing in with a different user called test. If I sign in and go to the first exercise, we see that there is no history of repetitions. And I can add here 1000, add, it's gonna appear here. And if I go back and sign into my account called Vadim, and go to the first exercise, I'm gonna see only my sets and not the one for the test user. So now we have successfully assigned sets or data in our database to specific users. We are doing this both when we create, we assign the username, and when we query, we are filtering based on our own username. This way, everyone sees his own data. Git add, git commit. Link sets to users by username. Perfect. So that means that our second goal for today is finished. We have linked sets to a specific user. We still have 3 goals for today. I want to implement charts for progress. I want to implement searching and filtering and pagination. Probably I'm gonna do charts at the end, because as we are still working with the API, we can implement this. Probably it's not gonna take a lot of time. Charts is a bit more complicated. I'm gonna leave it as the cherry on the top. How is it going, guys? Still following along? All right. Let's think. Searching and filtering or pagination first? Probably pagination. Probably we're gonna get into the pagination first, as this is, I think, the most important thing. Because at the moment, sorry for eating, but I need energy. Because at the moment, if we look at the home screen, we only see, let's say, Vadim, sign in. We only have 10 exercises and we cannot load more. But the API, the data source, has a lot of exercises. So by simply implementing the pagination, we're going to be able to load more items there. So to understand pagination, we will have to implement it or understand how it works at different levels. At the lowest level, we have our REST API coming from API Ninjas. Let's see how they handle pagination. For that, let's go ahead in their documentation API. I'm gonna search here exercises. And we see that there are parameters and there should be offset. Number of results to offset for pagination. Default is 0. So if we default is 0, it's gonna take our first page. If we say offset 10, it's gonna skip the first 10 exercises and will return us the next 10 ones. So this offset, if we send it in the request, it's going to give us different responses like the next ones. The next step is going to be our GraphQL. So from GraphQL, we need to somehow send the offset to API Ninjas. Probably and definitely we need in our GraphQL this to be a variable, because again, this needs to be changed differently for different requests. So let's go ahead and open our API and open exercises folder index GraphQL. At this moment, our endpoint is sending the request to exercises and it has two variables, muscle and name. Let's simply add here the offset of type int. It should be an integer specifying how many exercises should we skip before returning. Now I'm gonna check if it was deployed. There was an error, yes, because we don't need $sign here. $sign is in a different place. If I check now, all done, deployed. Let's check the dashboard. So if I go ahead and refresh and check the builder, yeah, the sets now already need something else, but I'm gonna look at the exercises actually. And if I only take the name, what? I don't need this one. And it's not set, but exercises. If I execute this query, we see a list of exercises until incline hammer curls. If, however, I'm gonna send here the offset, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If I'm gonna offset with 9, the first one should be the next page. So it shouldn't even be incline hammer curls. Actually, it is because there are 10. I didn't count them correctly. So as you can see, by simply sending offset here, different value, we are looking for the next page. Perfect. That means that we can go in our application, in our React Native, and see how we can implement there the pagination. Let's go in our source application index, because this is where we are querying our exercises. At the moment we have variables for the muscle and the name. Let's add the value for our offset of type int, and let's send it to the offset of our query, offset like this. Offset failed to fetch data because exercises query needs offset 0. Will this work? Yes. It starts with this one. If I do offset 10 and refresh, it will be the next page. Okay, but we want to be able to load more, as we scroll, we want to be able to load more. How will we be able to do that? Well, I'm gonna start, like later we're gonna automatically do that, but I'm gonna start with having at the end of a flat list a button here, a button imported from React Native with a title load more, and on press is going to be load more. Let's define this function here, const load more equal to a function, and let's start by console warning load more to see if pressing the button will work. If I press load more, we see that one. Okay, good. I'm gonna start with offset 0, of course. And let's go ahead in our the documentation of React query to see how pagination works with React query. Here is a page for pagination, but this is for examples. I'm gonna get into getting started. Paginated queries. Rendering paginated data is a very common UI pattern, and it just works by including the page information in the query key. Query key, page. However, if you run this simple example, you might notice something strange. Okay. But I think this is a way of having like actual pages where you move from one page to another. What we actually want is to append stuff. Let's see, let's scroll through it. Infinite query results with placeholder. Use infinite query hook. I think that's what we are interested in, infinite queries, by loading more data, load more data. Because in a mobile application, we rarely have like the UI of the UX of switching from page 1 to page 2, page 3. What we want is to scroll and to have an infinite list that paginates and loads the next set of items. So for that, we have infinite queries. Rendering lists that can additively load more data onto an existing set of data is also a very common UI pattern. The TimeStack query supports a useful version of useQuery called useInfiniteQuery for querying these type of lists. When using useInfiniteQuery, you'll notice a few things are different. Data is now an object containing infinite query data. Data pages, array containing the fetched pages. Page params containing the page params used to fetch the pages. The fetch next page and fetch previous page functions are now available. Fetch next page is required. Initial page, okay. Okay, so let's start by switching from a use query hook on the exercises screen to a use infinite query hook. Use infinite query. Use infinite query. Use infinite query, query key, query function, initial page param, get next page param. What function is required there that we don't have? Get next page param. This is required, right? Get next page param. Last page or pages. I don't know, let's simply say that we will return 10 for now. And what else? What else is required there? Initial page. The only difference is that we are not working with actual pages, we're working with offset base. So it's a little bit different. And the data right now is not an array, the data is an object with different pages. So data here, I'm wondering if there is a way for this offset base. One second, let's look through it. If your API doesn't return a cursor, you can use page param as a cursor, because get next page, get page params of a current page, you can use it, call give it next previous page. Last page dot length equal to 0. Initial query, placeholder, mutation, query, invalidation. Yeah, this data, I don't like what the data has is an object. Pages. Data, or let's say the following. Const exercises equal to data dot pages dot, I want to flat this data dot pages. It's gonna be array containing the fetched pages. I want to flatten this map, this array. Will that work? Let's see. Because from an array of arrays, I want just one array of exercises. Cannot read property length of undefined. Where did we read the length? Let's do console log exercises. If I check the logs, let's exercises. I think it needs to be a flat map where from the page we're gonna take the exercises. Vadim. Yes, it works. So it has the first list of items. That's good. And the next step is going to be to load more. To load more, we need to call a function. Fetch next page. Fetch next page. So this function will be called in the load more, or actually we don't need the load more. We simply need to call fetch next page when we press on the load more button. Load more. It actually loads more. And if I'm gonna press once again, it's gonna load more, but as you can see, it repeats. Because in our get next page parameters, we are using this 10. What we can do is, let's see, get next page parameters. Last page or pages. So pages, this is last page, and pages. We need to calculate the sum of all the pages. So pages dot. One simple way would be to assume that every page has 10 items. So to do pages 10, and in this situation, initial parameter should be 0. Initial page parameter. But we are never sending it there. Rickshaw carry. If I load more, it's the same. Yeah, because offset. Wait a second. Initial page parameters. Fetch project. And the fetch project has page parameters. Okay. The function in the query function will receive the page parameter. That means that the query function here will receive page parameter, and the page parameter is the value that we return. For example, this one. So we're gonna send it to the offset. Now if I'm gonna refresh, the first one is rickshaw carry, then incline, the last one is incline hammer curls. I will load more, and what we see is the next page. Straight bar wrist roll up. The last one is single arm palming dumbbell. If I do again, Romanian deadlift. So as you can see, these are actually different exercises. Military press, then we go into seated finger curl, seated finger curl. I don't know what's but you can press on it. Where is it? Seated finger curl, and you can see the instruction. Hold the barbell with both hands in your palms. Okay. So this way we implemented the pagination with a load more button. Nice. I like it. I also want to show you how you can, instead of having this button, how you can automatically do it. Because if you have used like this infinite scroll list in applications, you know that it doesn't require you to press anything. It's smart enough to understand when you get close to the end of a list, and then it loads more items. It loads more items, in the list, and you think that it's infinitely scrollable, but it actually only loads the next page when you get close to the end. A flat list is perfect for that. It supports us in doing that. So what we have to do is, for a flat list, fetch, or where is it? It's the property on and reached. And on and reached, what we should do is we should do fetch next page, right? Or let's initially say console log something just for us to see. Console warn and reached. If we do this, let's see. Let's sign in. Let's scroll. And we see when we actually reach the end, we see the on and reached. If I scroll up and then scroll down again, it again displays. There is also this property on and reach threshold, and this one specifies how many. Let's read the documentation actually to not confuse you. React Native on and reach threshold. A property of flat list. Let's search for it. It's actually not a property of flat list, but of scroll view. And a flat list is actually a scroll view. It's not even a scroll view, but a, what's it called? Virtualized list. So here, if I'm gonna search for this threshold, we see how far from the end in units of visible length of a list the trailing edge of a list must be from the end of a content to trigger on and reached. A value of 0.5 will trigger the function when the end of a content is within half the visible length of a list. The visible length of a list. Default is 2. So if 2 items are visible in the list, if 2 items left are visible to be scrolled, then our function is getting called, because we're gonna load more and we're gonna scroll, or it's gonna be actually 2 screens, I think. If it's 1, it's gonna be a full screen. As you can see, based on the scroll bar, if a full screen is left, for example, below the single arm, if I scroll, it displays this. So that means that we have exactly 1 screen size, and that's how it works. It was exactly 1 screen size of items. So a value of 2, I think, is okay. A value of 1 to have 1 screen size below. And when we get there on end reached, we need to call fetch next page. By actually calling it, or let's do it like this. And we don't need the button anymore, because now everything is going to be automatic. As you will see, initially we see a list, then just pay attention at the scroll bar. As we will scroll, it will get smaller because it will load the next page. It got smaller, and it got smaller, and as we scroll, it gets smaller and smaller until we get till the end. And that's how we implement infinite scrollable lists and pagination with all our setup. I think there is also the is fetching next page, and maybe we can check if it's fetching next page, not to fetch the next page, but maybe that's working automatically. I don't know. Because if it's already fetching, I don't want to fetch again. Is fetching, loading more. Yeah, here it's disabled if it's fetching next page. So that means that, yeah, I will also do here, let's add a function, or let's do the let's go back to having a function load more here. Load more. Let's do const load more equal. If it's not fetching, or let's do if is fetching next page, I want to stop because I don't want to load more. Otherwise, I want to fetch next page. This way, we are sure that we are not trying to fetch the same page twice as we scroll through the application. Oh, perfect. Awesome. So that was our pagination. So let me go ahead and do git add, git commit, -m pagination. And that's our next goal accomplished for today. pagination. Pagination here, it's done. Let's go ahead and in the following part implement searching, and probably only searching for now. Maybe filtering is gonna go later, but not sure if we're gonna have time. Because filtering is very similar to searching, the only difference is the UI. You need to specify like some kind of model where you set the filters that you want to work with. Hello everyone in the chat. How are you doing, guys? Following along? Let's get some some more snacks in. If you're enjoying it so far, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot. All right. Enough snacks. Let's go ahead and continue with searching. For searching, first of all, we need the user interface for the search bar, right? The UI for the search bar. Either we can add it ourselves here, or we can use the search bar that is coming from the platform from a stack navigator. And for that, I'm going to look at the React navigation. Let's go to the documentation of React navigation. Because yes, we are using Expo router, but behind the scenes Expo router is using React navigation. And here in the guides, I need to look at the, where is it? Navigators. Let's go to the stack. And here something like search. Where is it? Initial. Search header search bar option. This is from native stack actually coming. And by setting this header search bar options, we can enable the default way to render a search bar. Is it only for iOS? Only supported on iOS. Oh yeah, only supported on iOS and Android. So we need header search bar options on our stack screen. The stack screen, that is our home screen with a list of exercises. To do that, we first of all need to, before the flat list, we need to provide some options to the stack screen. Options, and here we need, as you can see, the option is called header search bar options. If we just add this one, if I'm gonna scroll up, no, it's not gonna show up. Let's see what we have to provide here. Autofocus, bar, tint color, cancel button, disable, hide navigation, hide when scrolling, input type, placeholder. Let's do a placeholder there. called search. So if I scroll up, it's hidden. If I scroll down, it's going to appear here at the top. And we can cancel and we can write something here. And then to get this value, we're going to have to hook into a callback function called a callback that gets called when the search bar has lost focus on change text. That's what we need. And this is the event. And in the header here, let's assign this. We need a state variable where we will store the search information. So let's call it search set search equal use state empty string initially. So if I write something here and then press enter, we need to execute the search. And to get this search bar or to execute a function, we can do that either when the search term is changing, but in that case you either have to debounce, which means you have to control how often you are sending this request to your server, or you're gonna send a request for every single keystroke, like for every single letter, and that can add up to a lot of requests. And in a way, like, that's a good user experience, because as you write, it's going to send these requests, but I'm gonna actually send only one request after we lose focus, after we press enter. So that is going to happen by sending here on blur run search or something like this. Do I want to do it this way? Or maybe I'm gonna do it in another way. Maybe the use infinite query has some kind of a debounce. React query debounce. I think it should have automatically. Use debounce from where? There is no. Yeah, let's see this example. Debounced search term. For that, we're gonna have to install the use hooks. Let's try that. Maybe we're gonna do the search without debouncing first, just to see and to do it like step by step, and then we are gonna debounce it. For example, what we will need is to specify the name when querying the exercise. Our API is ready, our query is ready. The only thing is that we need to send it here. So the name will be the search term. And because the search term is uniquely identifying the query, we definitely need to add it in the query key. Exercises and here search. So if I do here Vadim, initially it's going to probably show all of them, but if I do bench, it's gonna be dumbbell bench press, close grip bench press, weighted bench press, and so on. So it works, but the problem is that it sent a request for every letter that I wrote. So I wrote here 5 or 6 letters, it sent 6 letters to the server. So every keystroke, it shows something. Also, we can also show this. There is a property called old data. Well, yeah, let's first of all debounce it to solve this problem of sending too many queries and only sending it like once a second maximum. So we're gonna install this hooks library. And let's check the example. Yeah, debounce search term. After the search, we're gonna do debounced search term, use debounce, imported from this library that we just installed. Import use debounce from UI.dev use hooks. And we're gonna have a search here. And the value, like, it's gonna send maximum every half a second, or we can do every 1 second. And now we're in the query, we're gonna work with the debounce search term, both for the query key and for the value that we send here. So let's do Vadim, sign in. If I do a search bench, you see only after I stop writing, not more often than once a second, it does this. Bench press. Bench press goes there. And because it queries the cache terms, like if I go back to nothing, it's gonna automatically show it here. But if I write something here, and we'll start loading, maybe we should better, or no, I think that's really nice, like pull up. Pull. Okay, pull up is like this. Okay, that's good. You can also do a search.trim here in order to remove like white spaces from the beginning and the end of a search term. And now it works. There is this weird bug with the header size and the first item not being visible because it's below the search term. You can add like some additional padding there to make up for it. where we can always display the header by doing hide when scrolling false. This way is displayed here. It's always displayed, and I can add, I don't know, to the container, maybe some padding top, 100, 20, 50, 70, 60. So now, yeah, maybe 150. If I do pull up, weighted pull up, and so on. Yeah, this padding top like this actually should be probably dynamic. Like this is not the best solution, but at least it somehow works. So I'm not gonna bother on that. I'm gonna leave it like this. And this way we have searching implemented. I think it works. We can go ahead and do git add, git commit, search, exercises, and git push origin main. All right, one more goal accomplished. Searching is finished. Pagination finished, finished, finished. The last two things are charts for the progress and filtering. Okay, the charts will be interesting. For the charts, we need to use some kind of library. I'm building a production application for financial management. If you go to famify.notjust.dev, from here you'll be able to check it out. And there I'm using a charting library, and I don't have a screenshot for it yet. The charting library that I'm using, here is the Famify application that I was talking about. Haven't updated the screenshots yet, but there in this application I'm using the React Native Graph library implemented by the guys at Margello, by Mark, who is also the author of React Native MMKV, the vision camera, and also this React Native graph. It's working using React Native Skia and renders these beautiful kind of charts. There are some downsides of this library as well. There are some issues. It's quite basic. I open actually some issues that I get in my application, but it's quite interesting to work with it. It looks kind of nice, and I think we can try to work with it in our application. Use content instant adjustment behavior for the flat list. Oh, perfect. Let's see. You live, you learn. In the index, on the flat list, content, instant adjustment behavior. And what behavior do we have? Automatic. And we don't need the padding top. And this will work. Yes. Okay. That's nice. I like it. I like it like that. And I think if we need some space at the top, we will have to do content container, something with style. Is it style here? Padding. Not sure if I need everywhere, but at least on the top. Sign in. Yes, it has. Yeah, perfect. And to have the scroll bar at the end, what I'm gonna do is, instead of having the container having this padding, I'm gonna put the padding on the flat list and not on the top, but around everything. So now the scroll bar is all the way to the right. That's much better. Here, bench. Perfect. Let's do git add, git commit. Fixed flat list scrolling behavior. Thank you very much for the advice. Totally forgot about that. VS Code theme. It's material darker or something like that. Material. This one. Material, not theme icons. Material theme. And I'm using the color scheme. It's material darker, I think. That's how it's called. I don't have any more pistachios. Found one. All right, so graphs, right? All right, so let's go ahead and start working on the graphs. What the goal of this is where we have, for example, here where we have multiple sets based on different dates. I want to display them on a graph with to see the progress that you are doing. For that, we need a couple of things, you know. One of them is to know when this was added, like the date. But okay, that's gonna come in a moment. Let's go ahead and just install and set up the graphs so that we can see it, and then we're gonna think about like data that we need. So let's go into, as I said, we're gonna use the React Native graph from Margello. Let's go ahead in the documentation, and we're gonna need to install a couple of dependencies. The first one is React Native Reanimated. Let's go ahead in the React Native Reanimated and follow the documentation. Maybe we're gonna even open the documentation to install it in our application. Getting started with npm. No, we need installation. npx expo install React Native Reanimated. Let's go ahead and do that. Hopefully it's gonna work with with the latest version of SDK. Because yeah, it requires a couple of heavy dependencies like React Native Ski and so on. We need to add the reanimated Babel plugin in the babel.config. So let's copy it from here. Let's open Babel config file, and here under plugins, let's add the React Native reanimated. Correct. Then what do we need to do? It needs to be listed last. We need to restart, but we're going to do that later. Okay, that's it with setting up reanimated. The next one is gesture handler. Again, let's open it up and let's follow their documentation to install and set it up. View documentation, installation. And we're gonna go with, I'm gonna just copy the name because I'm also gonna use npx expo install React Native gesture handler. Oh, come on. Npx expo install gesture handler. After it's installed, let's see what additional things we need to do. After installation, we need to wrap our entry point with gesture handler root view. So let's import it, and inside our application layout, this is the entry point in a way, the root layout. Let's import the gesture handler and let's wrap everything into the gesture handler root view as per the documentation. It also needs this style flex 1 to make sure that it takes the whole page, as we can see here. Perfect. And that's it for the gesture handler. Let's close it. And the next one is the Shopify React Native Skia. Let's open it a new tab. Let's open the documentation. And let's zoom in a bit. Let's see the Expo. Expo React Native Skia. I'm gonna go into the Expo documentation to see, basically to copy the npx expo install command. Clear. Again, npx expo install Shopify React Native Skia. And I think that's it. We don't need to do anything else. Yeah, we don't. Now back to here, the last step is to do npx expo install React Native Graph. Finally, the library that we need. npx expo install React Native Graph. Let's go ahead and restart our development server that is running the Metro bundler for our React Native. I'm gonna stop it and I'm gonna start it by providing this clear command to clear the cache. Let's run it on iOS simulator. And reanimated couldn't be the version native part of reanimated. Why? I know, let's ignore it. Now when we are on a page of one exercise, I want to display a panel with a graph. For that, let me go ahead and create in the components a new file called progress graph or progress chart, JSX. Let's simply return a functional component. For now, that will render a text. And I'm going to open it in our application and use it in the details page. The similar way as we have here new set input. I want to render it above a new set input. how did we call progress graph, and it was automatically imported for us from the components that we defined. I'm going to, let's add some styles here. Style sheet. Styles equal style sheet.create, and there will be this container styles that I want to do to match the other panels that we have there. Styles.container. For example, I'm going to look at the new set input, and here we have this container with background color with and so on. Just like that, yes, they look similar. Progress graph. Okay, so now we're gonna work in this progress graph to render, starting with a dummy chart, and then we're gonna think how to use the information, the data that we have from the user to display a proper chart. So what we need to do is we need to render a line graph by providing the price history, not the price history, but the points. So let's start by importing line graph from React Native Graph. Let's go ahead and render this line graph here, and we see that it requires some properties. One of them is the points, which we can initialize with an empty array. The other one is animated, and the animated should be false. Let's start with animated false. And the color, let's go with this one. So let's sign in, let's go to an exercise, and the price graph is there. Let's go ahead and give it a style. Styles.graph. Oh, not like this, but below. I know, I'm gonna give it a width of 100% and a height of 200 pixels, something like that. Maybe a background color, gray. It doesn't actually need a background color. We know that that box is our graph. Because we don't have any points, that's why we don't see anything yet. So if I'm gonna go ahead and define here the points, initially an empty array, and send the points here, still not going to show anything, but we're going to be able to go ahead and define some actual points. The points should have the following properties. It should have a date, and it should have it should have a date, and it should have a value. But the date, what? Yeah, the documentation is still like needs a lot of work. Date. Well, line graph. I'm gonna look through the source code to see line graph props. There should be points. Where is it? Oh, here, graph point. Value and date. And date should be of actual date object. So that means that we will have date, new date, and value, for example, 10. And then another point there with another date and so on. In JavaScript, let's go ahead and initialize the date. How do we initialize the date? JavaScript date. Constructor, new date, year, month, year 2024. Is it month? December, yes, 01 01. Then we have 0102 and 0103. 15, and this one is 20. What's happening? Hey, what's happening? Come on. Expo Go. Workouts. Okay. Now going to the first one. Hopefully we should see something. Yes, we see something. And if, for example, it's going to be, I don't know, 16 here, we're going to see how everything changes. And of course, if we add the next date here, like the 4th, 17, we see all of this plotted on the graph on the chart. Nice. So, okay, we are able to see the progress, we are able to see the graph. Now we need to somehow get the right data to display there. Let me go ahead and do a commit now. Render integrate React Native graph. Okay, give me just 1 second. I'm gonna be back in very, very quickly, and then we continue. Oh, all right. So now that we have the graph displayed, we need the actual data about the sets that we have in the database to plot them on the graph. For that, as you can see, we need a date and a value. And currently, our set doesn't have a date, nor does it have a unique value. Yeah, it has reps and weights, but which of them are we going to plot? I don't know. Another way is about the date. But currently, our sets do not have a date. The thing is, what happened to my camera? Hello, 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 camera. Hello. Let me try to restart it. No, it's blocked. Very weird. Hello. Now it's not even visible. Hopefully it's not broken after 4 hours of live streaming. Let me just double check something. I think everything should be fine with it. All right, anyway, so probably it's gonna be like this. We're gonna finish the tutorial without my face. Let me maybe even hide it from here. And we can continue because we are able to continue. The most important part is that you can see the screen. All right, so as I was saying, we need two things. We need the date of our set when we created it, and we need the value. Let's start with the date. We don't have it. We might be able to add it whenever we insert it, but we can also take it from the object ID. If I remember correctly, MongoDB object ID to date. Based on the object ID, we can take the date when it was created because it's a UUID and it contains information about the date and the time. So how can we extract it in JavaScript? Date from object ID. MongoDB object ID to a JavaScript timestamp. Mongo object ID. Oh, toString subtract 0 to 8. Let's try this because, yeah, let's try this one, this snippet. And we're gonna try it first of all inside our exercise list item, the one that is rendering one exercise list item for in the sets list. In the flat list, we are rendering items reps, weight, and let's also render, for example, the item.id. This is the ID of item. But I want, let's extract this to a separate component in order to be able to calculate some of the stuff. So components, new file, set list item set.jsx. Here I'm going to have React Native functional export, set list item, and from the set list, instead of in the flat list to define this text, I'm going to copy it, move it to our set list. We are going to receive the item through properties, and we are going to render it in our set list like following: set list item, and the item, where let's call it set, is going to be item. Because we call it set, let's go here and change it to set. Set.reps, set.item, set.id. Now everything should work as it was working before, but here we're going to be able to do some calculations. For example, what I want to do is I want this snippet that will help us to transform from Mongo object ID. So let's do const timestamp equal to the object ID that we want to use. In our case, that's set._id. It is already a string, so I can do it like this. And then const created at is going to be new this, and timestamp like this. So let's see what do we have here in the created at dot to ISO string. Sign in. If I go here, we see that this one was created 2024-01-23 at 17:28, 17:33. It works. It actually has the date parsed from the timestamp. That's nice. That's good. If you want to render human readable dates in the application, what we can do is we can import date.fns. Let's install it. Was I using date.fns? Not sure what's the this one looks very interesting, the template. But let's go ahead and install by doing npm expo install date.fns. And we want to render distance to now, like 1 minute ago, 1 year ago, and so on. We need to import this one from date.fns at the top. So instead of created at, we are going to display format distance to now, and we're going to provide the created at date. 1 hour, 1 hour. Yes, that's nice. And because we have a separate component, I'm going to add a separate view, maybe a bit of like the text here. Let's add a text below for the date, not to have everything in one row. This text will have the background color and everything like that will go towards this one, background color, padding border radius will go here. We don't need overflow on the text anymore. And this one will have style, color gray. This one will have font weight bold. And a gap of 5 between the elements. Yeah, now it looks much better. So we started from the graph. On the graph, we need a date. Okay, we know how to get the date. The next step is we need a value, but maybe, okay, let's first, yeah, I know. We're gonna start by mapping the sets on the graph and then think what to do next. The progress graph, in order to display something, it needs an array of sets, right? So this is going to be this property here, sets of a progress graph. Let's see where we are rendering progress graph and send the list of sets that we want to plot on the screen. We are rendering that on the detail screen here. So the sets should be our where sets list. Oh boy, you see the sets are in the sets list. But sets list, yeah, we're gonna, because we don't have access to the sets inside our description details page, we only have access to it in the sets list. I think I'm going to move a graph inside to be rendered in the sets list itself by rendering here the, wait a second, no, not like this, but in the list header component, I'm gonna expand this one to first render the list header component that we receive from the parent, and then if I do it like this, progress graph, where is it? In the detail screen, we have this progress graph. I'm gonna remove it from here. And the error in the sets list, what's up here? Don't need it here. Okay, now it works. And I'm gonna render the progress here in the flat list of our sets. Progress graph imported from our progress graph components, and the sets here is datasets document. Okay, we see progress graph. Let's go back to our progress graph. If you see that this issue that it's not scrolling properly at the bottom, that's because don't worry about that. Something should have a flat list one. But now let's do a console log sets. And here we're gonna see the list of sets that we receive. Our let's call them dummy points, and let's use them in the graph while we are actually going to define our points. Because our points will be based on the array of sets, and we are going to map over them, and for every set we need to return an object with date, new date, and the value. For the value, it's simple because we can take the set dot reps, for example, and I will also default it to empty array in order for this not to give us errors. If now I'm gonna console log points after the sets, what I'm gonna see. My computer starts to... Come on, what's happening? Workouts. If I go here, we see an array with date, value 2, value 50. That's our repetitions. Okay, for the date, we remember how we can transform that. We did that in the set list item for the created ad. Maybe we can put this into a, let's go into the progress graph. And let's define it as a function. Object or ID to date. We're going to receive the ID and we are going to return this one. Not set, but ID like this, substring. And now we can use this function ID to date to transform our set._ID to a date. Now if I look here, we see the correct dates, perfect. And I think we can try to switch from dummy to actual points. If we do that, we see the changes from what we have. If I'm gonna add a new, why is the new input at the top? Well, yeah, I know why it's at the top. If I'm gonna add a new repetition here, for example, 20, 30, add, it's gonna look like this, and 30, 28. And it doesn't change a lot in shape just because all of them are at the same hours and dates. If I'm gonna manually go ahead, but I'm not gonna be able to change the object ID, you know, that's gonna be tricky to do. I think there is Mongo object ID or times object ID to timestamp online. There is a converter, so I can take an existing object ID from here. Is it this one? I hope it's this one. And I can change, for example, the date from 22 to 20, take back the ID and update it here. Will it allow me to update? No, it doesn't allow me to update, but I can duplicate this. For the ID, I can specify that one and a specific ID that I created. For the reps, I can do 20 or let's say 12. Weight is going to be 30. Insert. Now I hope that I added a new item in this Rick's carry that is older, like 3 days ago. So we see it here. And I can do one more for example, 17. I will take this one. Let's duplicate this. Change this one. And I will do less repetitions, 25. Insert. Now if I go there, yes, we are seeing a progress, and we see from 6 days ago all the way till today that we are moving along. And instead of plotting the sets, what you can do is you can plot the volume. And the volume is a better approach because it takes into consideration both weight and sets. So in the graph, we don't need the dummy points anymore. We can delete them. So for the value, we can multiply reps by set.weight, and in this way, that's going to be the volume. Sign in. Let's go here. Yes, we see the volume there. If I'm gonna do console.log points, let's see what points do we have. Value 6, value 600, value 200. Yeah. The ranges are all over the place. That's why the graph looks this way. But you can also add, like, if you look into the documentation of the graph, of React Native graph, you can also add pan gestures to be able to move between the items, and you can also add the range if you want to specify what range should your values be. So that was the graph. I'm super happy that we managed to implement it. You'll probably have to do some checks. For example, if you're going to an item that doesn't have anything, yeah, it doesn't show the graph at all, so not a problem. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and delete the console logs that we have here. And I can do git add, git commit -m graph data from database. Perfect. Git push origin main. All right, guys, so that is another goal for today. It's charts and graph for our progress. The only thing that we didn't do is the filtering, but it works quite similar with the searching. From the API standpoint, if we look into the exercises, for example, in the application index, in our query, we already have, for example, the muscle, and we can specify what muscle do we want to filter on. The only thing that you have to do is add the user interface where you can select a specific muscle for the filtering, and everything else is gonna work. Just simply add the muscle in the query here, add a state variable for the muscle, update it when you change the UI, and in the query function, besides the name, add also the muscle here, and that way you will be able to filter based on a property. You can check the API documentation because you can filter based on other parameters as well, not only muscle, but difficulty as well, and so on. And that was everything for today, guys. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I cannot switch to my camera because it actually doesn't work. And I think we have to end this. Make sure, this Friday we're gonna have another tutorial. We're gonna have another tutorial for implementing monetization with Revenue Cat. So make sure to stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, not to miss it out. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this whole project. That's the end of it. And I encourage you to take it to the next level. Make this as a starting point and implement other features, continue working on a workout tracker. It's a great way to experiment, learn, and advance as a React Native developer. All right, that was it for today, guys. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next live stream. Bye-bye.